You're on a page dedicated to history. Here, we explore the past to help you relax and gain new knowledge. Subscribe and like, because by the end of our narrative, you'll sleep soundly. Close your eyes and let's begin. When discussing great peoples of Eurasia, we often think of the Greeks, Romans, Chinese, and Arabs. However, there's another significant branch of humanity, the Turks, who've influenced the continent's fate for centuries. Their legacy is so vast that imagining the development of Asia, Eastern Europe, and even the Middle East without it is difficult. The Turks played a crucial role in shaping the political map of Eurasia, creating khanates and empires while becoming allies and adversaries of the greatest powers of their time. From Siberia to the Balkans, from China to the Middle East, cultural, linguistic, and political traces of the Turks are everywhere. Their history encompasses epochs of great migrations, conquests, and unique cultural identity. The word Turk carries deep significance. In ancient inscriptions, it was used as a self-designation and a symbol of unity among the people. Scholars debate its origin. Some link it to the concepts of strength and sturdiness, while others associate it with legality and authenticity. Regardless, the ethnonym Turk became a unifying term for various tribes that gradually settled across the continent. The first mentions of the Turks, or Proto-Turks, appear in 6th century Chinese chronicles. The Chinese called them Tuyuk or Turkud, describing them as powerful nomads controlling the steppes north of the Great Wall. Additionally, Persian sources mention the Turks as warlike neighbors appearing at the borders of Iran and Central Asia. These early records mark the starting point for a history that soon transformed the Turks from one of many tribes into a significant historical force. The question of the Turks' origin remains one of the most discussed topics in historical science. The most well-known is the Altai theory, which emerged in the 19th century. It asserts that Turkic languages, along with Mongolic and Tungusic, form a unique Altai language family, with the homeland of these peoples located in the Altai, Sayan, and Upper Yenisei regions. This is indicated by similarities in grammatical structures and shared words for basic concepts like horse, water, and sky. However, many contemporary scholars are skeptical of this hypothesis, noting that long-term interactions among nomadic peoples in Central Asia could lead to mutual borrowings and don't necessarily indicate a common origin. In the 20th century, another viewpoint emerged, suggesting that the Turks could have formed as a distinct group at the intersection of the Sayan, Altai, and Eastern Mongolia, where archaeologists find early burial mounds and graves related to Proto-Turks. These tribes lived in harsh conditions of steppes and foothills, basing their economy on nomadic pastoralism, raising horses, sheep, camels, and cattle. The horse held a special place in Turkic culture, serving not only as transportation, but also as a symbol of wealth, strength, and military superiority. Archaeological finds show that even in the graves of ordinary warriors, horses were often buried alongside their owners, adorned with bronze and silver gear. The culture of Proto-Turks combined elements of a practical nomadic lifestyle with a vibrant spiritual life. At the core of their beliefs was the cult of Tengrism, the supreme sky deity. This wasn't just a religious notion, but a whole worldview system. The sky was seen as the source of power and justice, and the Khan or Kagan was perceived as the son of heaven, gaining legitimacy from Tengrism. Alongside this, a developed shamanism existed, with shamans conducting rituals, communicating with ancestral spirits, aiding in healing, and predicting the future. Turkic contacts with neighboring peoples began long before the first Turkic Khanate appeared. To the east, they interacted with China, and these relations were complex. On one hand, the Turks raided frontier territories, forcing the Chinese to strengthen the Great Wall. On the other hand, trade flourished. The Turks supplied horses, essential for imperial cavalry, while receiving silk, metal goods, jewelry, and luxury items in exchange. To the west, the Turks encountered Iranian peoples, primarily the Sogdians, who acted as intermediaries on the Silk Road and played a significant role in spreading literacy, religions, and goods between East and West. The earliest written mentions of the Turks date to the 6th century. Chinese chronicles refer to them as Tuyuk or Turkut, describing them as a strong tribe that subdued many neighboring peoples, noting their skills in blacksmithing and ironworking, which gave them an advantage in warfare. In later Persian and Arab sources, the Turks are also portrayed as warlike neighbors from the steppes, increasingly significant in the region's politics. Thus, before establishing their own states, the Turks were already known to their neighbors as a powerful force. The formation of the Turkic Khanate marked a turning point in Eurasian history. Until the mid-6th century, the steppe was a mosaic of scattered tribes fighting for pastures and control over trade routes, with none able to create a stable state. Everything changed in 552 CE when the Turks, led by Bumun Kagan, revolted against their masters, the Gökturks, a people that had long dominated Central Asia. The Turks had been subordinate until then, serving as blacksmiths and warriors for the Gökturks. Chinese chronicles mention that they lived in the Altai Mountains, engaging in iron smelting and processing. Their metalworking skills and access to rich mines allowed them to gain strength and prepare for rebellion. The victory over the Gökturks and the proclamation of Bumun as Kagan marked the beginning of the Turkic Khanate. His brother from the Timi received the title of Ebgü, ruling the Western territories, leading to a dual system of governance where the empire was split into eastern and western parts, but remained under one dynasty, the Ashina. Within a few decades, the Khanate developed into a vast empire, encompassing areas from Manchuria and northern China to the Caspian and Black Seas. The Turks established control over crucial sections of the Great Silk Road, making them key players in trade between East and West. Their cavalry was highly mobile and dangerous, while their military structure ensured swift campaigns and the subjugation of neighboring tribes. The main historical source from that time became the Orkhon inscriptions, created in the 7th century in Mongolia. These stone stelae, with Old Turkic runic script, were discovered in the 10th century in the Orkhon Valley and became a true revelation for historians. They capture speeches and guidance from prominent Kagans, including the Belge Kagan and his brother Kultigin. The texts describe military campaigns, victories and defeats, and relations with China and other neighbors. However, even more significant is that they touch upon reflections on the fate of the people. They say that the Turks will face destruction if they abandon their traditions and ancestral laws, but they'll be strong if they remain loyal to Tengri and their Kagan. These inscriptions aren't just a historical document. They reflect the philosophical heritage and self-awareness of the Turks. The structure of the Khaganate combined military and sacred authority. The Kagan was seen as the son of heaven, drawing strength from Tengri. His power relied on the council of nobles and military leaders. The steppe split into regions governed by Shads and Yabgus, subordinate to central authority. The army formed the foundation, with each clan required to provide warriors. Belief in Tengri and shamanic practices reinforced society. The heavenly deity served as the source of power and victory, while shamans acted as a bridge between people and the spirit world. Relations with China presented a constant challenge. The Turks raided northern territories of the Celestial Empire while forming alliances, marrying Chinese princesses, and engaging in trade. Chinese emperors sought to pit different Turkic clans against each other to weaken the steppe state. To the west, the Turks fought against the Eftolites and, allying with Persia, destroyed their state, gaining control over Central Asia. This positioned them to assert influence over caravan routes and play a significant role in global politics. However, maintaining such vast territories proved difficult. Internal contradictions, struggles among the nobility for power, and dependence on China's foreign policy gradually undermined unity. By the end of the 6th century, the Khaganate split into eastern and western parts. The Eastern Khaganate, centered in Mongolia, frequently depended on China, rising and submitting again. The Western Khaganate, controlling Central Asia and the steppes of Kazakhstan, adopted a more independent policy, interacting with Iran and Byzantium before confronting the Arabs. Despite its short-lived existence, the Turkic Khaganate left a significant legacy. It became the first state to unite steppe tribes under a single authority, establishing the tradition of nomadic empires, followed later by the Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, and Mongols. It left a written heritage that opens a window into the thoughts and values of early Turks. This experience of unity and struggle for survival in harsh steppe conditions laid the groundwork for the further development of Turkic peoples over many centuries. After the collapse of the Great Turkic Khaganate, a new political situation arose in Central Asia. Instead of one center, several emerged, with each Turkic tribe vying for its place. The Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, and Karluks became the main heirs, each influencing the region's history. The Uyghurs established their own Khaganate in the mid-6th century, founded by Kutluk Bilge Kulkhagan. The state was centered in Mongolia, in the Arkon Valley, with the capital at Karbolgasun, often referred to as Ordu Balik. This city became one of the largest in Central Asia at that time. Unlike previous nomadic empires, the Uyghurs focused not only on military strength, but also on culture, literacy, and religion. A significant achievement was the creation of Uyghur script, based on the Sogdian alphabet, which was more practical for lengthy records than the ancient Turkic runes, and eventually became the basis for Mongolian and even Manchu scripts. The Uyghurs showed openness to new beliefs. In the 6th century, they embraced Manichaeism, a religion of Iranian origin that combined elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism. Manichaeism became the state religion of the Khaganate, influencing its art and worldview. Soon, Buddhism and Nestorian Christianity spread among the Uyghurs. This made the Uyghurs cultural intermediaries on the Silk Road. Caravans passing through their lands transported not just goods, but also books, ideas, and images. In the Turfan oasis, archaeologists discovered numerous texts in various languages: Uyghur, Chinese, Sogdian, and Tibetan. This showcases the multilingualism and cultural diversity of the Khaganate. Uyghur art achieved a remarkable level. Cave monasteries in Turfan preserved murals depicting Buddhas and saints, created with vibrant colors and fine techniques. The Uyghurs also advanced book production, being the first among the Turks to use paper for mass copying of texts. All this distinguished them from other nomads. However, the military power of the Uyghurs wasn't as solid as their cultural heritage. In the mid-9th century, the Yenisei Kyrgyz attacked them. In 840, the Kyrgyz defeated the Uyghurs and destroyed their capital, Karbolgasun. The Uyghurs scattered in different directions. Some settled in Turfan and Gansu, establishing new oasis states, while others merged with neighboring tribes. Thus, the Uyghur Khaganate ceased to exist, but the cultural legacy of the Uyghurs continued to live on and influence neighboring peoples. The Kyrgyz, victorious over the Uyghurs, originally lived in the upper reaches of the Yenisei River. Their power spread across Mongolia, and for a time they became the dominant force in the steppes. Chinese chronicles describe them as a tall, fair-haired people, known for their severity and martial spirit. The Kyrgyz adhered to a traditional nomadic lifestyle. Their wealth was estimated by the number of livestock, while military strength was measured by the number of horsemen. They skillfully used bows, swords, and heavy armor borrowed from neighbors. However, the Kyrgyz didn't create a stable, centralized state. and left behind a less rich cultural legacy compared to the Karluks and the Islamization of the Uyghurs. Their dominance was more of a military episode than a lasting civilization, but it altered the political balance in Central Asia. The Karluks played a crucial role after the collapse of the Turkic Khaganate, occupying the lands of the Seven Rivers and Fergana. The Karluks became the foundation for the future Karaghanid state, the first Turkic Muslim power in Central Asia. By the 6th to 9th centuries, they established close ties with the Arabs and embraced Islam in the 10th century. This event marked a significant milestone. Through the Karluks, Islam actively spread among Turkic tribes, gradually displacing religions like shamanism, Buddhism, and Manichaeism. With the arrival of Islam, Arabic script, new scientific and literary forms, as well as architectural and urban traditions, entered the region. The Karluks not only demonstrated themselves as a military force, but also as a commercial power, controlling key hubs on the Silk Road that connected China, India, and Iran. They laid the groundwork for cultural interactions that would later lead to the rise of Middle Asian states such as the Karakhanids and Timurids. Their contribution consisted of transitioning the Turkic world from nomadic life to a settled urban civilization based on Islam. Thus, the period following the collapse of the Great Turkic Khaganate became a time of radical changes and the emergence of new power centers. The Uyghurs brought literacy, religious diversity, and high art to Turkic culture, while the Kyrgyz showcased their military might and temporarily became a dominant force in the steppe. The Karluks played a key role in the region's Islamization and laid the foundations for future Muslim states. Each of these peoples uniquely complemented Turkic history, creating the conditions for the rise of great empires. After the early Khanates and cultural centers like the Uyghurs and Karluks marked a new phase in Turkic history, their gradual entry into the Islamic world. This transition was lengthy and challenging, yet it shaped the future for most Turkic peoples, positioning them as key pillars of Muslim civilization. The first contacts between Turks and Islam date back to the 7th century, when Arab forces from the Umayyad and later Abbasid dynasties reached Central Asia. Initially, relationships were hostile, and the Turkic tribes, alongside their allies, fiercely resisted. However, Islam gradually infiltrated their societies, not only through military actions, but also through trade, missionary efforts, and diplomatic alliances. The Sogdians played a particularly significant role in this process, trading along the Silk Road and promoting Arab culture. By the 10th century, many tribes, including the Karluks, Oguzes, and Kipchaks, began to voluntarily embrace Islam. They perceived the new faith not just as a religion, but as a system of laws, a written language, an advanced state structure, and a means to integrate into the vast Muslim world. The most significant figures in this story were the Oghuz Seljuks, who descended from a small clan residing around the Aral Sea and the Sirdarya River. Their ancestor, Seljuk Bek, lived in the late 10th century and was the first of his line to convert to Islam. From that moment, his descendants started to gain power. Initially, they served as mercenaries for the Muslim rulers of Khorasan, but soon they became an independent military force. By the early 11th century, the Seljuks began large-scale conquests. In 1035, they defeated the Ghaznavids at the Battle of Dandanakan and captured Khorasan. This victory opened the way for them into Persia and Mesopotamia. In 1055, Tugril Beg, Seljuk's grandson, entered Baghdad and received the title of Sultan from the Abbasid Caliph. From that point on, the Seljuks became the de facto protectors of the Islamic world, expanding their influence over vast territories, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, parts of Central Asia, and Anatolia. The Seljuks not only conquered new lands, but also established a powerful state structure. At the top was the Sultan, recognized as the protector by the Caliph, beneath whom were the emirates overseeing various regions. To govern the state, the Seljuks widely employed viziers and divans, councils of officials. The most renowned vizier was Nizam al-Mulk, who served the sultans Alparslan and Malik Shah. He wrote the treatise Siyasatnama, outlining the fundamentals of governance and the need for strong central authority. On his initiative, numerous madrasas, known as Nizamiya, were founded. The Battle of Manzikert played a crucial role in the region's history. In 1071, Seljuk Sultan Alparslan faced the army of Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes near the fortress of Manzikert in eastern Anatolia. The battle ended in a complete victory for the Seljuks. The Byzantine army was defeated, and the emperor was captured. Never before had a Byzantine ruler fallen into the hands of a nomadic leader. Alp Arslan showed generosity by releasing the captive for a ransom. Nevertheless, the battle's aftermath was monumental. The borders of Byzantium in Asia Minor collapsed, allowing Turkic tribes to pour in. This event initiated a mass migration of Turks into Anatolia, where they formed the Sultanate of Rome, named after the term Rome, as Muslims referred to Byzantium. The capital became the city of Konya. The Rum Seljuks gradually transformed Asia Minor into Turkic territory, constructing cities, mosques, madrasas, and caravanserais, while actively developing trade and craftsmanship. Their architecture, preserved to this day, blends Turkic and Iranian traditions with elements of Byzantine art. It was in Anatolia that the process of forming the Turkish ethnicity began, as Turks mingled with local Greeks, Armenians, and Arabs, creating a new culture. Over time, the Greek language receded, while Turkish became the language of daily life and administration. The Sultanate of Rome lasted until the 13th century, when it fell to the Mongols, but it directly preceded the Ottoman Empire, which emerged in the 13th century from the ruins of the Seljuk state. The Ottomans inherited the military and state traditions of the Seljuks, along with their role in the Islamic world. Thus, the acceptance of Islam by the Turks marked a pivotal moment in their history. Once nomadic warriors of the steppes, by the 13th century, they became rulers of the Islamic world. The Seljuks not only expanded the boundaries of Muslim civilization, but also laid the foundations of statehood, on which the Ottoman Empire and modern Turkey were later built. When Genghis Khan began his great conquests in the 13th century, Central Asia and the steppes from Altai to the Don were already populated by numerous Turkic tribes, including the Kipchaks, Naimans, Kirians, Karluks, and others. While establishing their empire, the Mongols didn't just conquer these tribes, they actively integrated them into their military system. Turks had rich experience in cavalry warfare and knew how to use both light and heavy cavalry, possessing long-range bows and leading a nomadic military lifestyle for centuries. Therefore, Genghis Khan and his successors readily relied on Turkic tribes. The Turkic language increasingly resonated in their armies, and over time, Turks formed the backbone of the military. The Mongol Empire was divided among Genghis Khan's sons, with the western part going to Juchi, his eldest son. It was here, in the lands from the Irtysh to the Dnieper, and then to the Danube, that the state later known as the Golden Horde emerged. Initially, it retained Mongolian traditions, but its population mainly consisted of Turkic tribes. Gradually, the Kipchak or Polovtsian language became dominant in the horde. By the 13th century, even the descendants of Genghis Khan, while formerly remaining Mongolian nobility, switched to the Turkic language and adopted Turkic customs. Thus, an occurrence known to historians as the Turkification of the horde took place. The Golden Horde became one of the key powers in medieval Eurasia. It and Rus spanned vast territories from Siberia to the Danube and from the Caspian Sea to the Baltic. The horde's influence stretched into Persia, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe, but it was particularly felt in Rus. In the 10th century, the Russian principalities fell under the control of the Horde Khan. This happened after Batu's campaign in the 1230s, when the Russian lands were devastated. For over 200 years, Rus remained dependent on the Golden Horde. Princes traveled to the Horde for charters, documents granting them princely authority, paid tribute, and acknowledged the Khan's supremacy. This dominance significantly influenced the formation of Russian statehood. Rus adopted aspects of governance from the Horde, such as tax collection systems, military organization, and diplomatic principles. At the same time, the Horde's rule did not destroy the uniqueness of Russian culture. Over time, the princes of the Grand Duchy of Moscow managed to use the Horde's experience to strengthen their power and unify the territories. However, the ties between the Turks and Rus extended beyond mere relations of subjugation. Even before the Mongol invasion, the southern borders of Russian lands bordered the Polovtsians and Kipchaks. These nomads occupied the steppes from the Don to the Dnieper and regularly fought with Russian princes. Chronicles preserve descriptions of many battles, and literature features the epic about the campaign of Igor, where the Polovtsians appear as adversaries. However, relationships weren't always hostile. Princes often forged alliances with Polovtsian Khans and married their daughters. Thus, the Polovtsians significantly influenced the lineage of Russian nobility. After the Mongol invasion, the Polovtsians became part of the Golden Horde, emerging as one of its leading peoples. Their language gradually became common across the Horde. It was spoken by both Mongols and Slavs, alongside Iranian peoples under the Khan's rule. The influence of the Polovtsians extended beyond the steppes. Some of their tribes migrated to Hungary, leaving a mark on the culture and toponymy. The impact of the Kipchaks and Polovtsians is evident in the language and culture of many Eastern European nations. Numerous Turkic words entered the Russian language, such as kazna, caravan, sarai, bashmak, and ataman. Even fundamental concepts like money have Turkic origins. The arts and epic literature retained images of nomads and iconic warriors, becoming part of the region's cultural memory. Thus, in the 10th and 13th centuries, the Turks, as part of the Mongol Empire, not only preserved their uniqueness, but also gave a new face to a vast state. They made the Golden Horde a Turkic dominion, defining its language and culture, and significantly influenced the fate of Rus and all of Eastern Europe. The Kipchaks and Polovtsians, once viewed merely as nomadic foes, formed the foundation of a new historical reality, and their legacy continues to thrive in culture today. After the collapse of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, many small Turkic principalities and beyliks emerged in Asia Minor. One such beylik was located in northwestern Anatolia and belonged to Osman, son of Ertugrul. By the late 13th century, this lineage wasn't the most powerful among its neighbors, but its advantageous position on the border with weakened Byzantium allowed it to expand. Osman and his warriors, known as Ghazis, meaning warriors of faith, conducted raids on Byzantine fortresses and settlements. Their troops were mobile and well organized, relying on the traditions of steppe cavalry. By the early 14th century, Osman's beylik had become a growing power. His son Orhan captured important Byzantine cities, including Bursa, which became the first capital of the Ottomans. A regular army emerged, soon based on Janissaries, a special infantry corps formed from Christian boys converted to Islam. This system, known as Devshirme, allowed the Sultan to have a military entirely devoted to him and independent of noble clans. A pivotal moment in history was the conquest of Constantinople. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, known as the Conqueror, after prolonged preparations, besieged the ancient capital of Byzantium. Huge cannons capable of demolishing massive walls and skilled siege tactics made the impossible possible. The city, deemed impregnable for over 1,000 years, fell. Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. This event shook the entire Christian world. For the East, It meant the definitive establishment of Muslim powers in the region, and for the West, the necessity to find new routes to India, eventually leading to great geographical discoveries. After the fall of Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire rapidly expanded. In Europe, its armies conquered Serbia, Bulgaria, Hungary, and captured much of the Balkans. Several times, the Ottomans approached the walls of Vienna, and all of Central Europe felt their pressure. In Asia, they subjugated Asia Minor, Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. In 1516, Sultan Selim de Viras defeated the Mamluks and annexed Egypt, Hijaz, and the holy cities Mecca and Medina. Ottoman sultans became not only rulers of a vast empire, but also guardians of Islamic sanctities. In North Africa, their authority extended to Libya, Algeria, and Tunisia. In the Black Sea region, they subdued the Crimean Khanate, making it a vassal. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire reached its zenith under Sultan Suleiman I, known as the Magnificent. His reign lasted over 40 years and became a golden age for the state. The Ottomans controlled key trade routes between East and West, waged active wars against the Habsburgs and Safavids, and maintained a powerful navy in the Mediterranean. Their army was one of the strongest in the world, and the economy relied on controlling trade in spices, silk, and grain. However, the Ottoman Empire was not only a military power, but also a center of the richest culture. A unique architectural style emerged, blending Islamic, Byzantine, and Turkic art. The great architect Sinan, who lived in the 15th century, created numerous mosques, palaces, bridges, and aqueducts. His greatest creations, the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul and the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, are still considered masterpieces of world architecture. In Istanbul, the Topkapi Palace rose, symbolizing the Sultan's power and the center of imperial governance. Ottoman culture flourished in various fields. Artists created miniatures, calligraphers perfected the art of writing, and music, poetry, and crafts thrived. All of this was under the patronage of the Sultan's court. The Ottomans also developed an education system. Madrasas provided knowledge in theology, law, astronomy, and medicine. The state became a true bridge between East and West, uniting Arab, Persian, Byzantine, and Turkic traditions. The legacy of the Ottoman Empire is still felt today. Modern Turkey is its direct successor, yet traces of the Ottoman world are visible in other countries. In the Balkans, mosques, baths, bridges, and entire districts built during the Ottoman era remain. In the Arab world, administrative and legal systems established in Istanbul are still in use. Even in Eastern Europe and Russia, many Ottoman influences persist in language and daily life. The Ottoman Empire endured for over a century, from the late 10th century until the early 20th century, leaving a significant mark on 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. It was a time of an empire composed of conquerors, merchants, scholars, and artisans, like the Timurid and Uzbek Khanates, whose legacies continue to influence the political and cultural landscape of modernity. After the collapse of the Timurid state, Central Asia became a stage for the emergence of new Turkic state formations and tribal alliances, each contributing to regional history. The Timurid era began in the late 14th century with the rise of Timur, known in Europe as Tamerlane. He was a Turkic military leader and political figure whose influence extended from India to Asia Minor, from the Kazakh steppes to the Persian Gulf. Timur was born in 1360 in Samarkand, and through military achievements, he created a vast empire. He positioned himself as a defender of Islam and a successor to Genghis Khan. Although his origins weren't related to the Chinggisids, his power stemmed from personal charisma, military discipline, and continuous campaigns. After his death in 1405, his empire quickly fell apart, but the Timurids continued to govern various regions. Among them, Ulugh Beg, Timur's grandson from the early 15th century, gained the most fame. He became known as an outstanding astronomer and mathematician, building an observatory in Samarkand, where observations led to the creation of a star catalogue that was considered the most accurate in the world for a long time. Following the decline of the Timurids, Uzbek Khanates emerged. In the early 16th century, Shaiban Khan, a descendant of Genghis Khan through Shiban, established a new state in Transoxiana. In 1502, he conquered Samarkand and Bukhara, displacing Timur's descendants. The Uzbek Khanates, such as Bukhara, Khiva, and later Kokand, became major centers of Islamic science and culture. They developed madrasas, built mosques, and thrived on trade along the Silk Road. Bukhara, in particular, earned the title of the Dome of Islam, attracting students from various regions. At the same time, Kazakh Khanates began to form. In the mid-16th century, some Turkic and Mongolian tribes, dissatisfied with Uzbek Khan rule, broke away and created their own state, the Kazakh Khanate. Its rulers relied on the traditions of nomadic life and steppe unity. Over time, Kazakh society divided into three major Jews: senior, middle, and junior. These groups weren't unified states in the traditional sense, but organized nomadic life, regulated clan relations, and defined foreign policy. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Kazakhs waged continuous wars against the Dzungars, Uzbeks, and Nogais. Under pressure from the Dzungar threat, Kazakh Khans began seeking support from Russia. In the 1730s, parts of the Jews acknowledged St. Petersburg's protection, marking the beginning of Kazakhstan's gradual incorporation into the Russian Empire. Turkmen tribes maintained the nomadic lifestyle the longest, inhabiting the Karakum Desert and oases along rivers, engaging in trade, controlling caravan routes, and raiding neighbors. Turkmen didn't establish a unified state. Their organizations were clan-based. Only in the 19th century did the Russian Empire gain stable control over their territories. Even then, Turkmen clans maintained their autonomy and ancient traditions. The Crimean Khanate, formed in the 15th century after the collapse of the Golden Horde, occupied a special place in Turkic history. Its rulers, the Giray dynasty, descended from Genghis Khan and viewed themselves as legitimate heirs to the steppe tradition. The Crimean Khanate maintained close ties with the Ottoman Empire, recognizing its suzerainty and aligning as an ally in wars against Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. Crimean Tatars became famous for their cavalry, which regularly raided Russian and Polish lands, taking thousands of captives. This became a tragic chapter in Eastern European history. Simultaneously, Crimea served as an important trade and political center, with its capital, Bakhchisaray, symbolizing Turkic architecture and culture. The Ottoman Empire used Crimea to control the Black Sea, but its influence gradually waned as Russia strengthened its position. By the late 15th century, following the Russo-Turkish Wars, Crimea was annexed to the Russian Empire, marking a significant milestone in the region's history. Thus, in the 15th and 16th centuries, many Turkic states and alliances existed in the east. The Timurids left a considerable cultural legacy and scientific achievements. Uzbek Khanates became centers of Islamic scholarship. Kazakh Jews continued nomadic traditions while gradually coming under Russian influence, and Turkmen tribes retained their independence and traditional lifestyle. The Crimean Khanate served as a link between the Ottoman Empire and Eastern Europe. This period showcased the diversity of Turkic state forms and the richness of their historical experience. After playing an independent role in the Middle Ages, Turkic Khanates gradually fell under the control of two great powers, Russia and China. This process took several centuries and completely transformed the political and cultural landscape of Central Asia, the Volga region, and Xinjiang. Russia began actively expanding its borders into Turkic lands as early as the 15th century. In 1552, Ivan IV, known as the Terrible, captured Kazan, ending the Kazan Khanate, one of the largest heirs of the Golden Horde. 2 years later, the Astrakhan Ulus was conquered, and Russia established control over the lower Volga and access to the Caspian Sea. By the early 17th century, the Siberian Khanate, which occupied the territory of western Siberia, was conquered. From that moment, the path eastward was open. Over the next 2 centuries, Russia gradually subordinated the Turkic peoples. In the 17th century, the Bashkirs in the Ural and Volga regions were subdued after several uprisings against Moscow's authority. By the 18th century, Russia solidified its control over the Urals and the Volga, expanding its influence over the Nogais, Kalmyks, and Tatars. In the first half of the 19th century, systematic conquest of Central Asia began. In 1868, Russian troops occupied Tashkent, initiating the subjugation of the Kokand Khanate, Bukhara Emirate, and Khiva. By the end of the 19th century, the entire region became part of the Russian Empire, and Turkestan became its governorate. The religious situation in these lands was complex. Most Turkic peoples practiced Sunni Islam, but its character varied. In the Volga region, Islam had deep roots among Tatars and Bashkirs, closely intertwined with local traditions. In Central Asia, Islam was even stronger, with thriving Sufi brotherhoods and many madrasas, while the cities of Bukhara and Samarkand were considered centers of Islamic scholarship. The Russian authorities long viewed Islam with suspicion, but Catherine II changed this policy. In 1779, she established the Orenburg Mohammedan Spiritual Assembly, which became the official body regulating Muslims in the Volga and Ural regions. Thus, Islam found itself in a special position. It persisted but remained under state control. Alongside Islam, Orthodoxy spread, and some Turkic peoples voluntarily accepted baptism, seeking privileges and protection. Others were baptized against their will. This led to the formation of specific groups among the Tatars and Chuvash, who adopted Orthodoxy while retaining their Turkic language and many aspects of their former culture. Thus, the religious landscape of Turkic territories in the Russian Empire became diverse. Islam, Orthodoxy, Uyghurs with their connections to China, and remnants of ancient shamanic beliefs coexisted here. The fate of the Turkic peoples in China evolved differently. There, the primary Turkic group became the Uyghurs, living in Xinjiang, also known as East Turkestan. They established powerful khanates and states along the trade route. However, by the 18th century, this region came under the control of the Manchu Qing dynasty. In the mid-18th century, the Chinese army finally conquered Xinjiang and incorporated it into their empire. For the Uyghurs, this became the start of a prolonged period of subjugation and struggle to maintain their uniqueness. The Qing dynasty authorities enforced strict control policies. They resettled Han Chinese and Manchus in Xinjiang, built military fortifications, and imposed taxes and administrative norms that clashed with local traditions. The Uyghurs rose up several times, with one of the largest rebellions occurring in the 1860s. Uyghurs and other Muslim peoples in the region attempted to establish an independent state. For a time, the Kashgar Khanate existed under Yaqub Beg's leadership, but the uprising was soon crushed and control was re-established. Russia and China's policies towards nomadic peoples had much in common. For both empires, the nomadic Turkic tribes posed a threat to stability. Russia feared the Kazakhs, Bashkirs, and Kyrgyz, who could retreat to the steppes and incite revolts, while China viewed the Uyghurs and other Muslim peoples in Xinjiang as a danger. Therefore, both Petersburg and Beijing aimed to settle nomads, restricting their movements and implementing tax systems. In Russia, fortified lines like the Orenburg, Siberian, and Semirechensk lines were established. Military settlements and garrisons were located along these lines to monitor the steppes and prevent nomads from raiding. In China, A system of military colonies and Han resettlement was used to alter the region's ethnic composition. By the end of the 19th century, most Turkic peoples had lost political independence and fell under the control of the two empires. Nevertheless, despite this, Islam, tribal customs, and nomadic culture helped the Turks maintain their identity. The Turkic world underwent significant changes in the 19th century. The Tanzimat and Pan-Turkism movements emerged. The once great Ottoman Empire slowly lost its dominance. Meanwhile, Turks in Central Asia lived under the rule of the Russian Empire, while Uyghurs were controlled by the Qing dynasty. However, it was in Anatolia that events unfolded, shaping the destiny of the entire Turkic world in modern times. The Tanzimat reforms marked a crucial attempt to modernize the Ottoman Empire. They began in 1839 with the issuance of the Gulhane Hatti Sharif, a decree announced by Sultan Abdülmecid Ibris. This decree proclaimed the equality of all subjects before the law, regardless of religious affiliation, along with reforms in the military and tax system. It was the first step towards establishing a rule of law. In 1856, the Hatu Humayun was adopted, further equalizing the rights of Muslims and non-Muslims to strengthen the empire from within. The reforms also impacted the military. European instructors were invited. Military schools were opened and modern weapons were acquired. State banks appeared in the economy, and railroads and telegraph lines were built. Secular schools opened, and newspapers began publishing in Istanbul and other major cities, fostering a new public thought. All these efforts aimed to catch up with Europe, which had already experienced the Industrial Revolution. However, despite the attempts, the Ottoman Empire continued to weaken. National movements in the Balkans sparked constant uprisings. Greece gained independence in the early 19th century. Later, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Romanians rebelled. Each defeat only heightened the sense of crisis. During this period, ideas of Pan-Turkism began to form in intellectual circles. This movement emerged in the late 19th century among educated Turks, primarily Crimean Tatars and Azerbaijanis, studying at universities in Russia and Europe. They pondered that all Turkic peoples, divided by empires and state borders, shared common roots, language, and culture. The movement's founder, Ismail Gasprinsky, a Crimean Tatar who published a newspaper, promoted the idea of unity in language, thoughts, and actions. He emphasized that Turks should recognize their commonality and unite, even at a cultural level. By the early 20th century, Pan-Turkism began to influence political circles in the Ottoman Empire, especially among the Young Turks who came to power in 1908. World War I became a trial for all Turkic peoples. The Ottoman Empire joined the war in 1914 on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary, hoping to regain lost positions. Ottoman troops fought in the Caucasus against Russia, in Mesopotamia against the British, and in Palestine and Egypt against the English and French. One of the most memorable events was the Battle of Gallipoli in 1915. The Entente attempted to break through the Dardanelles, but the Turkish army led by Mustafa Kemal successfully repelled the attack. The victory at Gallipoli became a symbol of resilience and awakened national consciousness among Turks. However, the war ended in disaster for the empire. In 1918, the Ottoman Empire was defeated and the Allies prepared to partition its territories. The Treaty of Sèvres proposed to divide Anatolia among Greece, Armenia, France, and Italy. Istanbul and the Straits were to come under international control. It seemed that only remnants of the great empire would remain. At this critical moment, Mustafa Kemal, who would become Atatürk, emerged on the historical stage. In 1919, he arrived in Samsun and began organizing resistance against the occupation. Under his leadership, the War of Independence began, lasting until 1923. The Turks managed to defeat Greek forces, halt the advance of Armenian and French troops, and with the people's support, Kemal achieved the annulment of the Treaty of Sèvres. The new Treaty of Lausanne secured Turkey's independence within its modern borders. In October 1923, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed with Ankara as its capital. The Sultanate was abolished, and a year later, the Caliphate was also dissolved. Ataturk implemented radical reforms. He introduced the Latin alphabet, replacing Arabic script, established a secular education system, granted women equal rights, banned polygamy, and abolished religious courts. He aimed to transform Turkey into a modern nation-state in the European mold. These reforms made Turkey the first modern republic among Turkic peoples, exemplifying how to preserve national identity while simultaneously modernizing the country. Ataturk became a symbol of awakening and national resurgence. After the 1917 revolution and the Civil War, the fate of Turkic peoples became tied to the new state of the Soviet Union. For some, this era offered opportunities for modernization and education. The time of trials and repression marked the history of many peoples. In the 1920s, the Soviet government began a policy known as National Korenizatsiya, aimed at strengthening the cultures of various peoples within the new country and fostering a sense of belonging to socialist construction. During this period, national republics were established. In 1924, the Uzbek and Turkmen Soviet Socialist Republics emerged, followed by the Kyrgyz and Tajik republics in 1929. In 1936, the Kazakh Republic was formalized. The Azerbaijan Republic was located in the Caucasus. Autonomous entities for Tatars, Karachais, Balkars, and other Turkic peoples. Formally, it appeared as self-governance, but real power remained in Moscow. The policy of indigenization facilitated the development of local languages. New writing systems emerged for many Turkic nations. In the early 1920s, they introduced the Latin alphabet to simplify education and distance cultures from Islamic traditions tied to Arabic script. However, by the late 1930s, they replaced Latin with Cyrillic, marking a stricter integration of the republics into the Soviet system. Newspapers, textbooks, and books began to be published, and schools and theaters opened. This era saw the emergence of new generations of writers, poets, and playwrights, shaping modern literature in their native languages. Sak and Saifullin thrived in Kazakhstan, Abdullah Kadiri in Uzbekistan, and Samet Vurgun in Azerbaijan. By the end of the 1930s, severe repressions began, and the national intelligentsia, a symbol of cultural revival, faced accusations of nationalism and connections with foreign states. Thousands experienced arrests, exiles, and executions, significantly weakening Turkic societies and depriving them of entire generations of leaders. The years of World War II were especially tragic. In 1944, by Stalin's order, entire Turkic nations were deported. Crimean Tatars faced accusations of collaboration. From Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Azerbaijan, schools and cultural centers based on Turkish traditions operate. Turkey employs soft diplomacy, offering Turkic peoples a concept of unity based on language, history, and religion. Simultaneously, its foreign policy increasingly strives for independence. The country develops its own industrial capacities and military, actively participating in regional conflicts. The plight of Uyghurs in China remains one of today's most pressing issues. Xinjiang, also known as East Turkestan, was finally annexed by China in the 15th century, and since then, Uyghurs have been under the control of the Chinese government. In the 20th century, they attempted to establish an independent state several times. The first East Turkestan Republic was proclaimed in 1933 and the second in 1944. However, both efforts failed. Currently, Uyghurs make up a significant portion of the region's population, but their cultural and religious rights face strict limitations. The Chinese government actively promotes assimilation, restricting the use of the Uyghur language and pressuring Islamic traditions. Special re-education camps are established in the region. The international community has repeatedly expressed concern about the situation of Uyghurs, but Beijing continues to view this issue as an internal matter. Turkic peoples also play an important role in global migration. Millions of Turks live in Europe, primarily in Germany, where they began migrating en masse in the 1960s as guest workers. Today, the Turkish diaspora has become an integral part of European reality, with its own schools, mosques, and cultural centers. In recent decades, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz, and Kazakhs have actively worked in Russia, Turkey, and the Persian Gulf states, forming communities that maintain their languages and traditions while integrating into the global world. Azerbaijanis also actively migrate to Russia and Western Europe, where they play a notable role in business and trade. Turkic communities exist in the United States and Canada, as well as in Australia. Thus, the Turkic world is represented not only in Eurasia, but on all continents. The modern Turkic world is a mosaic complex, comprising independent states, diasporas, cultural centers, and peoples under the control of other countries. A shared identity based on language, history, and traditions unites them. Turkey serves as a political and cultural leader. Central Asia is a region with enormous potential. Uyghurs symbolize the struggle to preserve their identity, while diasporas act as a bridge to the rest of the world. The history that began in the steppes of Altai continues today on all continents. The culture and spiritual world of the Turks have developed over many centuries, blending nomadic traditions with the influence of great civilizations. Common roots connect Turkic peoples from the Balkans to Siberia and from the Volga to Xinjiang. Since ancient times, Tengriism has been a crucial part of the Turkic worldview, with Tengri considered the main divine force, an eternal blue sky, the source of power and justice. Tengri was not perceived as a god in human form, but rather as a cosmic force determining the fates of people and states. Alongside Tengri, spirits of the earth, water, and ancestors were revered. Shamans, known as kami, acted as mediators between people and the spiritual world, performing rituals, healing illnesses, and foretelling the future. This faith fostered a profound connection between humans and nature, the sky, and their kin. Even after embracing world religions, Tengriist beliefs persisted in rituals and traditions. Against the backdrop of Tengriism, Buddhism, Manichaeism, and Nestorian Christianity also developed among Turks, particularly evident among Uyghurs from the 6th to the 10th centuries, when their state on the Silk Road became a center of cultural exchange. Buddhism brought written texts and art. Manichaeism introduced a strict moral system, and Nestorianism connected them with the Christian East. However, by the 10th century, Islam became the primary religion among Turks. Initially, it was accepted by the Karluks and the Agus tribes, and later by most Turkic peoples of Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Volga region. Islam became not only a spiritual foundation, but also the basis for writing, laws, literature, and architecture. Nevertheless, some Turkic peoples embraced Christianity. Chuvashes entered the Orthodox world, Gagauzes became Orthodox Christians, and Karaites preserved an ancient Judaic tradition. Thus, the religious landscape of the Turks became diverse, but Islam remained the unifying factor for the majority. The Turkic script has undergone a long developmental journey. The first significant monument was runic writing created in the 6th to 8th centuries. These inscriptions, found in Mongolia's Arkhangai Valley, contain texts about the feats of Khans, wars, and national unity. They're carved on stone steles and still impress with their poetic nature. Later, with the spread of Islam, Turks adopted the Arabic alphabet, which was used for many centuries and became the foundation for numerous literary monuments. In the 1920s, many Turkic peoples began using the Latin alphabet, but by the late 1930s, the Soviet Union transitioned their writing to Cyrillic. Currently, some states, such as Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, are returning to Latin, emphasizing their cultural identity and independence. Turkic literature has preserved a great epic tradition, one of the most significant being the Kyrgyz epic Mana. Its volume captivates the imagination, and researchers estimate it includes hundreds of thousands of lines, making it the largest epic in the world. Manas recounts the hero's feats, his struggle for the land and people, and the descendants who continued his mission. The epic lacks a fixed. Forms have been passed down orally and performed anew over the centuries. Another significant work is Kitab-i Dede Korkut, created in the 10th and 11th centuries among the Oghuz tribes. It describes the feats of heroes, customs, and spiritual values of that era. These works are still seen as vital sources of national memory and identity. Music and oral creativity played a crucial role in Turkic culture. Storytellers and singers, Akins, Zhirao, and Bakshi, performed epics and songs, accompanying themselves on folk instruments like the dombra, kobis, and saz. Their art not only entertained but also educated, transmitting history, laws, and moral values. Songs could be heroic, philosophical, or love-themed, accompanying all significant events in the nomads' lives, from weddings to wars. The oral tradition includes proverbs, riddles, and parables, forming a distinct type of thinking rooted in ancestral wisdom. The lifestyle of the Turks reflected their nomadic way of life. The main dwelling was the yurt, a portable, round structure made from a wooden frame and covered with felt. The yurt could be easily dismantled and transported, making it ideal for nomadic life. It held deep symbolism. Its dome represented the sky, while its round shape symbolized harmony and the integrity of the world. The interior was divided into male and female halves, reflecting family structure. Horse breeding occupied a central place in their economy. The horse was not only a mode of transport but also a symbol of status, wealth, and military power. Traditional diets relied on livestock products like meat, milk, and kumis. The heritage of the Turks encompasses not only the steppes they inhabited, but also far beyond. Their influence on historical processes was felt for centuries, impacting world history, culture, politics, and even modern aspects of globalization. By the early Middle Ages, the Turks became key figures in Eurasian history. In the 6th century, they established the first Khanate, uniting the steppe tribes. The Uyghurs living in the same century left written monuments that became important sources on ancient culture. In the 10th century, the Seljuks made Anatolia Turkish land, paving the way for the formation of the Ottoman Empire. During this time, the Turks became part of the Mongol Empire, later becoming its cultural and military core. The Ottoman Empire reached Constantinople in the 10th century, making it its capital and transforming into one of the world's largest powers. Thus, for over 15 centuries, the Turks remained at the center of events that shaped the fate of an entire continent. Their cultural heritage impacted the daily lives of many peoples. This is particularly evident in language, where numerous Turkic words entered Russian. For example, the word saray means palace and relates to the Turkic term for tent or residence. The word kazna is linked to the concept of wealth and governance, while ataman reflects military leadership traditions. Words like saber and caravan came through military and trade connections. Even the word money has Turkic roots tracing back to the time of the Golden Horde. In Persian, Turkic borrowings appeared during the Seljuks and Timurids, when the rulers were Turks, but the court language remained Persian. This created a unique cultural synthesis, where Turkic words penetrated high poetry and everyday speech. Turkic terms also entered European languages, mainly through Turkish. Words like kaftan, tulip, yogurt, and baklava testify to deep mutual influences between East and West. In material culture, the influence of the Turks is also notable. The architecture of the Ottoman Empire combined Turkic traditions with Byzantine heritage, leading to the creation of majestic mosques, palaces, and bridges. The patterns of Turkic carpets are renowned worldwide, while music based on the sounds of the dombra, saz, and kobis preserved ancient melodies of the steppe. The oral tradition, including epics and works like Kitabi Dede Korkut, continues to be performed and perceived as part of living culture. However, the Turks' legacy encompasses not only cultural and linguistic aspects, but also political ones. In the 21st century, Turkic peoples have begun seeking ways to unite again. In 2009, an organization of Turkic states was founded, including Turkey, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Turkmenistan and Hungary participate as observers. The organization's goal is to develop cooperation in economy, culture, education, and politics, which can be seen as a continuation of Pan-Turkism ideas that emerged in the 10th century, but in a more practical and modern form. It isn't about creating a single state, but forming a strong union of countries united by history, language, and culture. In the modern world, Turks play a significant role through their diasporas. Millions of Turks live in Germany and other European countries. Uzbek, Kyrgyz, and Kazakh migrants work in Russia, Turkey, and the Middle East. Azerbaijanis and Tatars have established large communities in major cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kyiv. Turkic communities are also present in the USA, Canada, and Australia. These diasporas preserve language and traditions while becoming a bridge between the Turkic world and other regions of the planet. Thus, the heritage of the Turks manifests in multiple dimensions. In history, they were unifiers of the steppes and rulers of empires, from the Seljuks to the Ottomans. In culture, they created unique monuments, from epics to architectural masterpieces. In language, they left many words that have become part of everyday speech in various countries. In politics, they are again seeking forms of unity, preserving their identity in the face of globalization. The Turks are not just a part of the past, but also of the present and future of Eurasia. Their contribution to world history is significant. Their culture continues to live and evolve, while their political role grows stronger with each passing decade. The legacy of the Turks serves as a link between East and West, between antiquity and modernity, between the nomadic steppe and contemporary metropolises.